But why is inflation still a thing? Why is inflation still a thing? You telling me if I go up to the little government place or whatever, I try to get, a little something extra, like, I'm check short, y'all print this for me real quick. Y'all can't do that?
About that case and writing. 1 month ago, 27-year-old Josephine Tarwai was found dead in her apartment. Her family says they still don't know how she died, but those circumstances surrounding her death, they've led them to believe that something nefarious has happened to her. 11 Alive's Angelina Salcido reports.
I feel so terrible, for my young daughter.
After 29 days,
we still looking for answers.
The Tarwais are still trying to figure out how 27-year-old Josephine Tarwai died.
They want to sweep it under the rug. And that can happen in America here.
An incident report from Atlanta police labeled Josie's case a death, no crime, highlighting that she was found in her bed alone, naked.
We believe something happened to her because of a lot of the false narratives that we've got. The police told us that her room was barricaded. Now they say her room wasn't barricaded. They told us that they forced entry into her apartment. Then they said that the apartment people opened the door with a key for them.
That lock is so faulty.
This is video of apartment staff letting the family into the dancer's room with their private investigators 2 days after Josie's body was removed.
Waited for the police here 45 minutes. They never show up.
Inside, they found her clothes, a money counter, and belongings thrown around.
She had a fight with somebody in there, I'm pretty sure.
The family says a private investigator noticed all her nails were broken, along with bruises and scratches on her neck when she viewed her body.
Her friends are saying that she was being stalked by somebody, but then you want to say there's no chance of foul play.
Standing just outside her apartment now, Josie's brother and father plead with APD to look at her case closely.
It took getting help from you guys to get a phone call. Police are calling me, asking me, what do I think happened? I want to know what they think happened.
Or death will not go in vain.
Josephine Josie Tarwai was building a life that many people watched unfold online. She was consistent, visible, and connected, until she suddenly went silent. Friends noticed first. Messages went unanswered. Calls rang without reply. What made the silence more unsettling was what she had shared just weeks earlier. She believed someone was watching her. Days later, police entered her Atlanta apartment and found her dead. Within hours, authorities suggested there was no sign of a crime, but details surrounding the welfare check, the condition of the apartment, and the timeline of events raised questions that remain unresolved. No official cause of death was immediately released. Statements from law enforcement conflicted with observations later reported by the family. What happened between her last communication and the moment her door was opened is unclear. This case is not defined by what is known, but by what is missing, delayed, and unexplained. You're watching Global Crime Venue, where viral fame hides chilling secrets. From TikTok dancers and Instagram couples to rising Facebook personalities, we reveal the dark side of the spotlight. When the perfect posts turn into tragedies, we break down exactly how it all unraveled. These aren't just online stories, they're real cases with real victims. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new case breakdown. In our next episode, we'll dive into another shocking story of love, control, and a hidden danger that no one saw coming. Here's the untold side of what really happened. Josephine Josie Tarwai was a digital creator, nail technician, and podcast host who had recently relocated to Atlanta to expand her professional and creative work. She maintained an active online presence and consistent communication with friends and family, making her sudden disappearance from daily contact noticeable. When those communications stopped, concern grew quickly among people who knew her routines and habits. Josie's death did not immediately attract widespread attention, because authorities initially indicated that no criminal activity was suspected. However, as details surrounding the timeline, the welfare check, and the condition of her apartment emerged, questions began to surface. These questions were not based on speculation, but on inconsistencies, delays, and information gaps that had not yet been fully explained. Before her death, Josie had shared concerns with people close to her that she believed she was being stalked. These concerns were expressed verbally to friends, not through a formal police report. While there is no public record showing that she officially documented these fears with law enforcement, multiple individuals independently confirmed that she had spoken about feeling watched and unsafe. These statements later became a central point of concern when evaluating the circumstances of her death. When Josie stopped responding to messages and calls, her family, who lived out of state, requested a welfare check through the Atlanta Police Department. A welfare check is typically intended to confirm that an individual is safe when there is reason to believe something may be wrong. In this case, there was a delay between the initial request and the entry into her apartment. The reason for this delay has been described differently depending on the source, and those differences remain unresolved. Police eventually entered Josie's apartment and found her deceased inside her bedroom. Officers stated that she was alone and that there were no immediate signs of forced entry or obvious criminal activity. Based on these initial observations, the case was classified as no crime. This classification meant that the death was not immediately treated as a homicide investigation, and the scene was not handled with the same procedures that would apply if foul play were suspected. The absence of an immediately released cause of death further complicated the situation. Medical examiner reports often take time, but during that waiting period, information provided by authorities and information observed by family members appeared to conflict. Family members later stated that when they were suggested possible medical explanations, those explanations did not align with Josie's known health history. At the time, no official toxicology or autopsy findings had been publicly released to confirm or rule out those possibilities. As the family traveled to Atlanta to seek answers, they began raising concerns about the handling of the welfare check and the apartment scene. They questioned how the apartment was accessed, whether the door or lock functioned properly, and why there appeared to be inconsistencies in official statements. These concerns led them to hire a private investigator to independently review the circumstances surrounding her death. The involvement of a private investigator introduced additional observations that had not been emphasized in early police statements. These observations did not, by themselves, establish a cause or manner of death, but they added to the list of unresolved questions. The family stated that they were not attempting to assign blame prematurely, but were seeking clarity and documentation that had not yet been provided. At the same time, Josie's online following and broader community began revisiting her recent content, looking for patterns or changes in behavior. While public-facing material does not provide definitive answers, it helped establish a clearer timeline of her last known activities and communications. This timeline became important because it highlighted when contact stopped and how that moment aligned with the delayed welfare check. Josephine Josie Tarwai was a 27-year-old digital content creator, licensed nail technician, and podcast host who had recently relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. She was originally from Minnesota, where she spent most of her early life and completed her education. According to family statements and public records, Tarwai was known for being structured, independent, and intentional in both her personal and professional pursuits. She attended Bethel University in Minnesota, where she was recognized as an ACT 6 scholar, a program designed to support students with leadership potential and academic achievement. During her time in college, she developed interests in media, communication, and entrepreneurship. These interests later shaped her professional direction after graduation. Tarwai built an online presence primarily through TikTok and other social media platforms, where she shared content under the name Josie Daisy. Her videos focused on nail artistry, lifestyle routines, faith-based reflections, and discussions about discipline, boundaries, and personal growth. Her content style was consistent and structured, often following clear themes rather than spontaneous or trend-driven posts. She maintained a moderate but engaged audience and used her platforms to support her professional services and podcast work. As a nail technician, Tarwai was known for detailed, precise work. She treated nail artistry as both a technical skill and a business. Her social media presence frequently highlighted her process, client interactions, and finished designs. She used her platforms to attract clientele and to document her progression within the beauty industry. This profession required fine motor control, consistent hand care, and attention to detail, elements that later became relevant in discussions surrounding her death. In addition to her work as a nail technician, Tarwai hosted a podcast where she discussed personal discipline, spirituality, and life transitions. The podcast reflected a structured mindset and often focused on self-reflection rather than external conflict. Episodes suggested a person focused on long-term planning, routine, and stability. There was no public indication through her podcast content that she was experiencing immediate crisis or instability. Tarwai's decision to move to Atlanta was part of an effort to expand her career opportunities. Atlanta's larger creative and beauty industries provided a broader market for both digital content creation and nail services. Friends and family stated that the move was planned and intentional rather than impulsive. She secured an apartment and began establishing herself in the city, while maintaining close contact with people back in Minnesota. Despite maintaining an online presence, Tarwai was reportedly cautious about personal privacy. She avoided publicly sharing her exact location, did not routinely geotag her posts, and limited the amount of real-time information she shared about her daily movements. This approach suggested an awareness of personal safety and boundaries, especially as her online following continued to grow. In the weeks leading up to her death, Tarwai communicated concerns to friends that she believed she was being watched or followed. These concerns were not made public at the time and were shared privately. There is no publicly available record indicating that she filed a formal police report regarding stalking or harassment before her death. However, multiple individuals later confirmed that these concerns were communicated verbally and taken seriously within her personal circle. Despite these concerns, Tarwai continued with her daily routines. She maintained her content schedule, continued interacting with followers, and stayed in regular contact with friends and family. There were no public posts indicating plans to leave Atlanta or drastic changes to her lifestyle. Her communications did not suggest disengagement from future plans or responsibilities. Family members later emphasized that Tarwai was generally reliable in her communication habits. She regularly responded to messages and maintained consistent contact, particularly with close relatives. When this communication suddenly stopped, it was immediately noticed and considered out of character. This break in routine became one of the earliest indicators that something was wrong. Josephine Tarwai was a young professional actively building her career, maintaining structure in her daily life, and taking deliberate steps toward long-term goals. Her routines, career focus, and communication patterns provide essential context for understanding the events that followed, without implying conclusions about the circumstances of her death. In the weeks leading up to her death, Josephine "Josie" Tarwai maintained an outwardly consistent routine that aligned with her public presence as a content creator, nail technician, and podcast host. She continued posting online, communicating with friends, and managing her daily responsibilities. However, privately, she began expressing concerns that contrasted sharply with her visible stability. According to multiple friends, Josephine shared that she believed she was being stalked. These concerns were communicated through private conversations rather than public posts. Friends later stated that she described feeling watched and unsafe, though the specific behaviors or individuals she suspected were not clearly identified. There is no public record indicating that she formally reported these concerns to law enforcement prior to her death, and no documentation has been released showing that a police report related to stalking was filed during this period. Despite these concerns, Josephine continued living alone in her Atlanta apartment. She had relocated to the city to expand her creative and professional opportunities, and was reportedly intentional about her privacy. Friends noted that she avoided sharing real-time locations and did not publicly disclose personal details about her residence. This behavior, while common among online creators, took on added significance after her expressed fears became known. As September progressed, communication patterns with Josephine began to change. Friends and family later reported that she stopped responding to messages and phone calls around September 28th. This lack of response was considered unusual by those close to her, as she was known to maintain regular contact, particularly with family members. No explanation for the sudden silence was immediately apparent, and there were no public indications that she had planned to travel or disconnect. After attempts to reach her failed, concern escalated among her family, who were located out of state. Given the distance and the inability to physically check on her, they contacted local authorities in Atlanta to request a welfare check. A welfare check is typically initiated when there is concern for an individual's safety and an inability to confirm their well-being through normal means. According to reports, the initial welfare check request did not result in immediate entry into Josephine's apartment. Law enforcement officers reportedly visited the location, but did not gain access at that time. The reasons for this delay have not been fully clarified in publicly released records. There have been conflicting accounts regarding whether officers were able to assess the situation adequately without entering the unit, or whether procedural limitations prevented further action during the first visit. During the period between the initial welfare check request and the eventual entry into the apartment, Josephine remained unreachable. There is no confirmed record of outgoing communication from her phone or social media accounts during this time. Whether her devices were inactive, powered off, or otherwise inaccessible has not been publicly detailed. On September 30th, police returned to the apartment and gained entry. Reports have varied regarding how access was obtained, with some accounts indicating forced entry and others suggesting that apartment management assisted with a key. This discrepancy has become a focal point for later questions, but at the time, the primary objective was to locate Josephine and assess her condition. Upon entry, officers discovered Josephine deceased inside the apartment. The exact time of death was not immediately established, and no official timeline placing her final hours has been released. Early statements from law enforcement indicated that there were no immediate signs of a crime, a determination that would later be challenged by her family. At this stage of the timeline, critical information remains undefined. It is not publicly known when Josephine was last seen in person, whether anyone visited her apartment in the days before she stopped responding, or if any surveillance footage captured activity near her residence. There has been no public confirmation regarding interviews with neighbors or a review of building access logs during this period. The discovery of Josephine Josie Tarwai occurred after family members grew concerned when they were unable to reach her for an extended period. According to statements from relatives, repeated attempts to contact her by phone and text went unanswered, which was inconsistent with her normal behavior. As concern increased, her family, who lived out of state, requested a welfare check through the Atlanta Police Department. The welfare check request was reportedly made after Josie had been unresponsive for approximately 2 days. Officers initially went to her apartment complex but did not enter the unit at that time. The reasons for this delay later became a point of concern for the family, as there were differing explanations regarding whether access to the apartment was possible during the first visit. On September 30th, officers returned to the apartment and gained entry. Public accounts have varied regarding how access was obtained, with some reports stating that apartment management assisted using a key, while other statements suggested forced entry may have occurred. These inconsistencies were later cited by the family as an issue that required clarification, as accurate documentation of entry is critical in death investigations. Once inside the apartment, officers located Josephine Tarwai deceased inside her bedroom. She was found alone in her bed. Law enforcement indicated that there were no immediate signs of forced entry or an active disturbance that would clearly indicate a crime at the time of discovery. Based on the initial scene assessment, police publicly stated that the death did not appear suspicious and classified the case as no crime. At the time of discovery, officers did not release detailed information about the condition of the apartment beyond general statements. The public was not provided with a detailed inventory of the scene, nor was there immediate clarification on whether the apartment showed signs of disorder, missing items, or physical struggle. These details remained largely undocumented in early public reports. Josie's body was removed from the apartment and transported for examination by the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. Officials confirmed that an autopsy would be conducted, as is standard procedure in unattended deaths. However, no preliminary cause of death was released at that time, and investigators stated that toxicology results could take weeks or longer to complete. Following the removal of the body, family members traveled to Atlanta to view the apartment and obtain more information about the circumstances of the discovery. During this period, relatives reported observing details they believed had not been adequately addressed during the initial investigation. These observations included the condition of Josie's fingernails, which appeared broken, and marks on her body that were described as scratches or bruising. These observations were not officially confirmed in early police statements. The family also raised questions about the state of the apartment's interior. They reported that parts of the apartment appeared disturbed, and that there were issues with the door lock that they believed could be relevant to the timeline of events. These claims contributed to concerns that the scene may not have been thoroughly evaluated before the no-crime determination was made. Law enforcement maintained that there was no immediate evidence of foul play at the time of discovery. Officials indicated that certain medical explanations could not be ruled out until autopsy results were completed. However, no specific medical cause was confirmed publicly, and no timeline was provided for when definitive findings would be released. As days passed, the lack of detailed information surrounding the discovery became a focal point for further scrutiny. Questions emerged regarding the delay between the welfare check request and entry into the apartment, the documentation of the scene, and whether all potential evidence had been preserved prior to the family's arrival. These unresolved issues led the family to seek independent review. The discovery of Josephine "Josie" Tarwai's death immediately prompted responses from her family and close friends, many of whom stated that the official handling of the situation did not align with what they knew about her habits, health, or recent concerns. Their reactions were not limited to grief but focused primarily on procedural issues, unanswered questions, and inconsistencies in the information they received from authorities. After Josie stopped responding to messages and phone calls, family members in Minnesota requested a welfare check through Atlanta authorities. When they later learned that her apartment had not been entered immediately, they expressed concern over the delay. According to the family, the lack of urgency did not reflect the seriousness of a prolonged loss of contact, especially given that Josie was known to maintain regular communication with relatives and friends. They questioned why multiple days passed between the initial request and police entry into the apartment. Once authorities confirmed that Josie had been found deceased, the family reported difficulty obtaining clear and consistent explanations. Different accounts were allegedly provided regarding how officers entered the apartment, including whether force was used or whether building management assisted. These conflicting descriptions led the family to question the accuracy of the official timeline and the reliability of the scene documentation. Friends of Josie also began comparing notes, identifying gaps between what police described and what they personally knew about her circumstances. Several friends stated that Josie had previously told them she believed she was being stalked, information they felt should have been treated as relevant context when her body was discovered. According to those close to her, these concerns were shared verbally in the weeks before her death, even though no formal police report had been filed at the time. The family expressed concern that Josie's prior statements about feeling unsafe were not emphasized or acknowledged in early law enforcement briefings. They noted that labeling the case as no crime at an early stage limited transparency and reduced the scope of visible investigative activity. From their perspective, the absence of a publicly confirmed cause of death further complicated their ability to understand what occurred. After traveling to Atlanta, family members requested access to additional information, including incident reports, timelines, and evidence collected from the apartment. They also questioned whether all standard procedures were followed during the welfare check and subsequent scene processing. According to the family, the apartment's condition, including reports of disturbances and issues with door locks, did not align with the suggestion that nothing unusual had occurred. Friends who were familiar with Josie's professional life as a nail technician also raised specific observations. They noted that her work required careful hand maintenance and that any damage to her nails would have been noticeable and unusual. These observations, shared with the family, added to their concerns and reinforced their belief that further examination was necessary. As communication with law enforcement remained limited, the family decided to seek independent clarification. They hired a private investigator to review available information, revisit the apartment after police had cleared the scene, and document observations that were not fully addressed in initial reports. The investigators' involvement marked a shift from reliance on official statements to parallel fact-gathering. Publicly, the family began requesting accountability rather than making specific accusations. They emphasized that they were not asserting a confirmed cause of death, but were seeking answers supported by evidence. Their statements focused on process-related issues, such as response time, documentation, and communication gaps, rather than conclusions about criminal responsibility. Friends and supporters amplified these concerns through social media, sharing timelines, last-known interactions, and questions about the handling of welfare checks in similar cases. These discussions increased public awareness, but also highlighted how much information remained unavailable or unverified. Despite increased attention, official updates remained limited. Throughout this period, the family maintained that their objective was clarity. They continued to request the release of the medical examiner's findings, detailed police reports, and a consistent explanation of events leading up to the discovery of Josie's body. Following the discovery of Josephine Tarwai's body, the official investigation entered a phase marked by limited public information and growing scrutiny from her family. Law enforcement initially stated that there were no immediate signs of a crime, which meant the case was not publicly classified as a homicide at that time. As a result, details about evidence collection, forensic findings, and investigative steps were not fully disclosed. Because of the family's concerns about unanswered questions, a private investigator was hired to independently assess the situation. This investigator reportedly reviewed the apartment after police activity had concluded and documented observations that differed from the initial characterization of the scene. These included the general condition of the apartment, the state of the door and lock, and visible physical details on Josie's body that had not been publicly addressed by authorities. While these observations were not official determinations, they contributed to the family's decision to challenge the early conclusions made by police. At the same time, the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office began its process of determining the cause and manner of death. This process typically includes an autopsy, toxicology testing, and a review of medical history. Officials indicated that results could take several weeks or longer, depending on laboratory analysis and case complexity. Until those results are finalized, no definitive cause of death has been publicly confirmed. Law enforcement officials reportedly mentioned possible medical explanations during informal discussions, though no supporting documentation was released. The family disputed these suggestions, stating that Josie had no known medical conditions that would explain a sudden death. However, without an official medical examiner's report, these statements remained unverified and inconclusive. Another point of focus during the investigation involved the welfare check that led to the discovery of her body. Questions were raised about the timing of the response, how entry into the apartment was ultimately gained, and whether established protocols were followed. Conflicting accounts regarding whether the door was forced or accessed, with the key added to the uncertainty surrounding the official timeline. Requests for clarification from the family were met with limited responses, prompting them to seek additional records and documentation. Digital evidence also became a potential area of review. This includes phone records, social media activity, last known communications, and location data. Such information can help establish a clearer timeline of Josie's final days and determine whether there were interactions or patterns relevant to the investigation. It is not publicly known which of these materials have been analyzed or what conclusions, if any, have been drawn from them. As the investigation continued, the case remained open pending medical findings and further review. No arrests were announced, no suspects were publicly identified, and no official determination regarding foul play was released. The lack of definitive updates left key aspects of the case unresolved, maintaining focus on procedural gaps, unanswered questions, and the need for further examination rather than on final conclusions. And that concludes today's case. But remember, this is just one of countless stories the world has yet to uncover. Here on Global Crime Venue, our mission is to uncover the facts, honor the victims who can no longer speak, and make sure their stories are never erased. If what you heard today made you think, know this, more cases are on the way that will shock you, haunt you, and change the way you look at social media and the world around you. Be sure to subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. New investigations are released regularly, and trust me, you'll want to be here when the next story breaks. Before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. What stood out to you most in this case? Your voice keeps these stories alive. Until we meet again, stay cautious, stay informed, and never forget, justice starts with truth. Global Crime Venue, uncovering the stories behind the screen.